over the top of it. All right, number one, Hannah's got the ball. She's heading for her end zone. She makes a high lob into the end zone. Can she pick it up? It's on the ground and roll.
Okay, here we'll talk about the red team. That's the number one that just picked up the ball in the end zone. And the number one's job working in the area starts as soon as they get the ball, even if it's in midfield. And here she picked it up in midfield, so she's carrying it into the end zone herself. As she comes up to the 30-yard line, the number 3 is very close to her on her racket side, so she very appropriately throws it up and over to her left side. The only thing wrong with what she did, she's kind of close to the sideline, but she still had plenty of maneuvering room to throw it over to her non-stick side and still have room to turn to get back to it. The only thing did after right here when she throws it, she starts heading toward the ball rather than she should be taking it, making that pickup as if it were a lob pass over to that side. So instead of heading directly to the ball when she throws it over there, she should stay up against the number 3 going straight and then turn directly away from him to go pick up the ball rather than angling toward the ball as soon as she throws it. So there, she threw it in a good spot, nice and high. It should bounce up nice and high. The only thing is it bounced back in toward the field, and since she had turned toward the ball, it bounced right into her horse and then rolled off the field. But if she had been away from it, and then when it bounced, even if it bounced toward her as she turned toward it to pick it up, she would have still been able to pick it up and turn before she or the ball went out of bounds.
Get your racket in. Okay, well, there you go. All right. All right, Hannah has it in the end zone. She's got the ball. She's swinging around, putting a shoulder up.
Okay, we're watching the red team, and that's the red number 1 that has just picked up the ball in midfield. And her job in the end zone starts as soon as she gets possession, even if it's in midfield. So we'll watch her here, but we're only really commenting on how she maneuvers the ball as it deals with working in the end zone. So here, her approach to the end zone, as she gets up to the 30-yard line, she's got the number 3, the opposing number 3, on her left side, and she bounces it to her right side, which is very appropriate. She could have bounced it a little farther away from her, but it came up in a good place, and she bounced it down really hard, so it came up really nicely for her. Then when she catches it, she's got the 3 right on her, so she starts to make a gradual turn. And the reason you make a gradual turn is to get space between you and the number 3, and the number 3 is turning away, so she's getting space. And the reason you get space is to give you more options of how to get past him. And what I always suggest to do, you can make an opening to the goal if you have space by turning the way that the number 3 is not facing. And if he's not facing completely one direction, you get him to commit completely one direction and then go the other direction. So here as he comes around, he's facing the goal, so he's not really committed one way or another. He actually starts a little bit to turn to his right, but he sees she's coming on left just the way she's facing, so he turns back to the left. But she didn't get him to commit completely one way or another. So she could have gotten past him easier if she would have gotten him to commit, just started going to his right until he was facing completely right, and then cut back to the left and gone to his left after he's facing completely the wrong direction. But she tries to just beat him by blasting past him anyhow. And when she does go past him, she's within reach of his racket, and I never recommend that you ever let the ball in your racket within reach of the defender's team. But she does that, and he doesn't swing at her racket, and she does get past him. And then she's got her shoulder out in front. He may still be slightly within reach of her racket where he might be able to interfere with her pass. And if she thought this was an iffy pass, like might be a risk of him hitting her racket or catching the ball or interfering with her throw at the goal in some way, right at this instant when she would be throwing the goal, or actually one stride after this, when she would be throwing an iffy goal is the time to make that one subsequent turn. And you can see he's behind and trying to catch up, and if you just stop and turn, you almost guarantee that they would not stop and turn. And when you turn around and look at the goal, there won't be anybody around. You just throw it between the posts. But she continues on and shoots and makes the goal.
Gets it, she catches it, and she redeems.
Okay, here the red team, just the red number 1 has just caught the ball in the end zone. And as it turns out, she's almost facing the goal. And the number 3 is behind and to the other side of her, so there's nothing wrong with this. And it's easy, not much to talk about. But the reason that it is so easy is because they made their good connection at a time when the 3 was out of position.
Each takes her 3 off the side of the field.
Okay, the red team with the ball again. The 1 gets her pass. When the 3 is this time on her stick side and a little bit behind, she's actually closer. The 3 is closer to the 1 than I would like, but if she's happy with that and she can stay in front, she can just put it between the posts. So she makes her catch and decides she can get that pass off. Once again, it's pretty close to for the 3 being able to interfere. And if she was thinking that the 3, it was too iffy of a shot, what she could do is at this instant right here on the screen, instead of throwing the ball, if she would just sit her horse and turn completely to the left, the blue player would have passed her up and passed up the goal, and she'd be standing looking at an open goal to shoot at if she wanted to, instead of taking an iffy shot. But she figures she can get it off, and she shoots it.
And Paige comes back up with it. Paige did a beautiful job of letting the cat go by her. Paige thought about it, but decided to bring it back. That's good maturity coming out of this young lady. Paige is looking to make a turn. Oh, there. Looks like it's going past the center line.
Okay, the red number 1 just picked up the ball in the midfield again, and she's going to make her way to the end zone herself. So she works around and makes a good entrance into the end zone. The ball, the number 3 was on her left side, so she bounced it to her right, goes across at angles. Looks like she may have thought she could have made it as first caught it, but elects not to. And here the number 3 has gotten a little bit too far forward, so she's no longer between the number 1 and the goal. So if the number 1 would just sit her horse and turn right, and she could just shoot the goal right there if she shot it as soon as she turns. She is getting this horse to turn too much on his front end, so when he actually makes this turn, he doesn't sit on his hind end and make it. He kind of puts weight on his front end and puts his back feet into the end zone, so she couldn't have actually made that because she didn't turn him on his hind end. But there's one opportunity here, an opening that she didn't take advantage of. another hint. As soon as she started to turn, she could see that the 3 was turning toward her. If she had tightened up her turn, she should have gotten past him. So there's another opportunity of an opening that she missed. And then she goes to get some space, and she gets away from her. And here she's still okay, but she's about to make her final mistake that cost her this goal. Where right now she's got the number 3 on her non-stick side, and she's not under any pressure. But when she tries to turn toward the number 3 with less than a horse length between them, she can't get past. The turn she makes is probably illegal, but she doesn't get past the 3 when she makes that turn, turning toward her. She should have just kept her on the stick side and gone forward, maybe to the other side of the field and made another turn or something while the number 3 was still on her non-stick side. So here, I think that the turn that the number 1 is making is completely illegal, and they could have called that and stopped the play. Or they could have called one of these center lines that she does and stopped the play, and she ends up actually losing the ball also.
Time. All the way to the end. Heather calls for it. Heather catches it. She turns that nice little pony there. She was thinking about taking a shot, but Livy jumps out in front. Heather's taking a side shot. And
okay, this time we're watching the blue team, and the blue number 1 has just caught the ball in the end zone. The number 3 is pretty much between her and the goal, and our number 1 is facing the left corner. So she faces the corner and evaluates the situation, and then starts to make a turn. And then right here, when she started to face the goal, the number 3 was completely committed to the number 1 coming to the right side. Had the number 3 committed all the way to the right. And our number 1 faked a little bit to the left and then came back to the right. Well, what she didn't do is when she faked to the left, she didn't make the number 3 commit to the left, but then came back to the right anyhow. What she could have done, instead of faking to the left, if that 3 didn't come on with her, she could have just gone on left, but she could have continued going left until the 3 was completely facing all the way left, and then gone to the right, and probably got past her this first jump. So now she's coming across the face of the goal. The number 3 is pretty much between her and the goal, in a good position for the 3. And here she starts to make a turn away. Turn away is the way to do it. And the instant she sees the number 3 starting to turn toward her, if she would just tighten up her turn, she would be able to have a shot at the goal. But that's not what she does. Instead of tightening her turn, she makes her turn even more gradual, and gives the number 3 time to get back between her and the goal. So there she's kind of making a gradual turn away, and the number 3 has had time to now be completely between her and the goal. However, our number 1 did a smart thing by seeing that the number 3 is playing off of her, and anytime the 3 plays off of you, you should be able to just throw a goal, just throw over them and make a goal. And that's what she does here. So when she throws it, it was completely out of reach of the number 3, and it goes between the posts. Okay, here's another should be easy one. The number 1 just caught the ball in the end zone, and the number 3 is way behind. She's headed straight for the goal. And this should be easy and straight in. And she does make this goal, but she made it harder on herself than she needed to be. When she caught the ball, she was pretty much facing straight to the goal. And then when after she caught it, she started curving or angling kind of away from the goal, so that when she actually threw it, she had to throw it almost under her horse to point at the goal. And there was no reason she needed to turn, so she could have had a more straight in shot if she had just kept going straight in. Okay, we're watching the red team, and they don't connect on the pass over the line, but the number 1 stays between the number 3 and the ball and actually gets to it first. She didn't pick it up the way I would recommend picking it up, but she does come up with the ball in her end zone. And here she's in the D, but the number 3 is on the wrong side of her. And right here, when she's gotten outside the D, she misses an opportunity to just either throw backwards to the goal or just turn her horse and throw directly at the goal from the D at no more than a 45-degree angle, which should be easy. But anyhow, she misses that opportunity when the 3 had gotten out of position. And then when she comes over here, she keeps the 3 on her non-stick side, and that's good. And here, the number 3 has pointed more toward the number 1 than she should be. She should be pointing no more than crossways or perpendicular to the goal. And she's pointed more upfield than perpendicular to the goal. And if the number 1 would realize that, she could realize that the 3 was a little bit out of position, and the move the number 1 should make is a hard right turn right here. But she misses that opportunity also. And then, so she's going across the face of the goal. And as she starts her way across the face of the goal, the number 3 is forward of her, and our number 1 should be evaluating, since the number 3 is forward of her and might be able to actually bend her, push her up to this 30-yard line. She might be considering making a right turn while she still has plenty of room to turn right away from that number 3. But she doesn't show any signs that she is wanting to make a right turn. And then when she decides she does need to turn, she tries to turn into a player that's up against her, which is the wrong move to make, and she ends up not being able to go anywhere because she's trying to make that horse go where there is a horse blocking him and he can't go. So she can't turn left, and she ends up getting pushed and stepping over the 30-yard line.
Heather catches a nice pass, but now she's got Livy to deal with. Heather gets her.
Okay, now we're watching the blue team, and the blue number 1 has just caught the ball in her end zone. When she turns around, the number 3 is in a pretty good marking up position and pretty much has her blocked with the number 3 between her and the goal, and forward of her to where she can control the number 1. So here I would have the number 3, overrode a little bit, but not enough to make it a legal turn for the number 1 to turn across her back. Not only was the number 1 making that turn probably illegal turn, but it exposed, got her racket within reach of the 3, and when she kind of comes around the turn, she doesn't actually get past the 3. The 3's still on her. So now she's made the turn, and the 3's on her and between her and the goal again. So here the number 1 starts to turn away from her, at least getting her stick out of the reach of the number 3, which is very appropriate. And then here she kind of does something that I wouldn't do. The number 3 is committed all the way to the number 3's left, and so our number 1's better choice of maneuvering would have been to continue around the back of the number 3, go in the direction that the 3 was not facing. And she kind of was angled that way, like she might be thinking about going that way, but didn't make the 3 commit at all over to that direction, and then comes back to go the direction that the 3 is already facing. And then now the 3 is a little bit out of position, where she is not between the number 1 and the goal. So it's giving our number 1 where she may have an opportunity to do something. If she was, since she's gotten a little bit behind, she could just jump forward and shoot it right quick. But the 3 has gotten out of position where she should be looking for an opening. And here she doesn't take that jump out where, and here the 3 has gotten a little more out of position. She's still not between the 1 and the goal, and now she is almost facing up to the 1. She's more than perpendicular to the goal, the 3 is. So the number 1 should tell that now our number 1 is in an even weaker position, and she has a couple of choices to take advantage of that weak position. One is just make one jump to the left and throw the goal sideways. The other one, since she is facing, our number 3 is facing, left, is to go around to the side that she's not facing, to the right. And since the 3 was partially facing, she's going to be turning toward you, and anytime they turn toward you, they're going to get behind. So the number 1 does take advantage of that situation. I would have done it a little bit differently. As I got up to the 3 right here, instead of staying off of her and throwing kind of backwards to the goal, I would have gotten right up against that 3 and headed more directly and been able to shoot more directly straight at the goal. But she gets a shot off and it gets in.
Why UK Australia? Heather gets the ball past her nicely. Whoa!
So here's the blue team with the ball, and the number 1 just caught it in the end zone. And where she is now, if she could just throw it sideways right away, she's probably clear and out of reach of the number 3. She doesn't try that, and as long as she keeps her racket out of reach of the number 3 and can keep maneuvering, she still would be going pretty much by the book. So she turns, and that's very appropriate. And then the number 3 is turned away. So she has a couple choices here. If she has enough room between her and the number 3 horse, and I'm not sure she does, but if she had enough room between that number 3 horse to turn toward that horse, she could get the number 3 to commit all the way to the right like she's about to do, and then cut back, turn toward her, and go around to the left. If not, she'd probably be better off just continuing across the end zone and pick up the number 3 on her left side. And if she didn't have a shoulder in front where she could push her around, go ahead and make some other move after that with the number 3 on the non-stick side. So it looks like she did get her to commit pretty much all the way to the right and then goes around to the left. I'm not sure that she is making a legal crossing behind there. But that is the idea. Get them facing one direction and then go the other direction. So here she goes around, and she appropriately doesn't go right next to the 3. She still may be a little bit close, but when you're going by them on your stick side, you want to swing out far enough that you're not within reach of their racket. It's going to be making a harder angle for her, and if she thinks it would be an iffy shot or an angle, right when she would lean down and throw, instead of throwing, if she'd make another turn to the left, the 3 would be out of the way and she could shoot the goal then. So the 3 thought she might be able to get to hit the stick, but she swings and actually hits the helmet, and I think they call that. But our number 1 went ahead and continued on and shot the goal, and so she did get in a position where she had a shot at the goal anyhow.
Picking it up, couldn't handle it. Hazard comes up with a beautiful pickup. Heather's looking to get in there. Livy's going to try to keep her out. Heather makes a nice spinning turn, and she shoots. And she.
Okay, the blue team, that is the number 1 that has just picked up the ball. And we're not really interested in what she does until she starts her working into the end zone. And here, as she comes up to the line, she's electing to go in, placing the defender, the number 3, on her non-stick side, which is good. As she goes across the line, she throws it out well to the side so that the number 3 can push her toward the ball rather than over the ball. And she gathers the ball back up, still keeping the number 3 on her non-stick side. So far, so good. Now, when she makes her turn, she turns away from the 3, and that's very appropriate. And I might as well remind at this point, right-handed people, when they're making a tight turn against a defender to the right, you make that turn 120 degrees and jump out. Whereas if you make a left turn, you'd make it 180 degrees or more and jump out. You also want to be jumping out of every turn, and here she makes the turn and doesn't really jump out. What I would have wanted her to do would be jump out after she had gone 120 degrees around the turn, which makes her jumping slightly away from the number 3 and keeping her out of the stick. She turned more than that and then didn't jump out, just hesitated so far. If she had jumped out at 120 degrees, she would have been further to the center of the field, making the number 3 commit more to the left. What she did by turning and stopping is the 3 has got her blocked there, and she's going to go to the right without making the 3 commit all the way to the left first. And then she just fakes to the right and goes back to the left, and you can see the 3 hasn't committed all the way to the right either. So we would have wanted her to have made the 3 commit all the way to the right before turning back to the left. Then as she's coming by by the defender and the defender being on her stick side, she isn't swinging away from the defender enough to be out of reach of the racket. If the number 3 had been turned more to the right when our number 1 went around to the left, she probably wouldn't have been able to get back in time to get within reach of a racket before our number 1 sped past. But if she was, and like she is in this instance, our number 1 should have veered a little bit away, farther away from the number 3. So as she passed her up, she would have been out of reach of the number 3's racket. But she does get past her, doesn't get the ball hit out, and gets a shot at the goal and makes a goal.
Christy passes the ball off out in front. Heather manages to handle it this time.
Okay, the blue number 1 is just catching the pass in the end zone. And it's hard to tell, but the black number 3 is on her left, our number 1's left side. So I guess the black number 3 was trying to play between the ball thrower and the number 1. And when the 1 caught it, there's nobody between her and the goal. So she just turns and shoots and makes this goal.
Gets open. Paige receives a nice pass from Renee. Paige turns away from pressure, but Kat is trying to get all over her. This young lady has learned a lot, and Kat is going to try teaching her some new lessons as well. Yeah, I was a World Cup player too, and I can do just as good as you can.
Okay, now the red team with the ball. The number 1 just caught it in the end zone, and the opposing number 3 is maybe just a slight bit too far back. Probably not enough where the number 1 would feel very confident about just getting up against her and bending her toward the goal. But you have to be aware that if they are that far back, that's one option for you. And as the number 1 is going across to the right side of the end zone, she should be pushing up against that blue player to get herself farther away from the 30-yard line so she's able to have more room to turn away from the 3 whenever she decides she needs to turn away. So here she goes to start to turn away, and that's good. And she probably has noticed now the number 3 has gotten too far forward of the number 1. So our number 1 is very likely to beat her on this very first turn. Still making this turn to the right. She wants to turn 120 degrees and then jump out, make one jump before heading to the goal to keep out of reach of the number 3's racket. So she starts to turn away, and then actually turned more than I would have recommended before she jumped out. But she didn't jump out right away. She took another step around the turn to jump out. So she is really within reach of the number 3's racket here. And then the number 3 is catching up, and I would have started turning away as soon as you saw that you didn't have the go at the goal, just to prevent my racket from ever being within reach of the number 3. And so she finally does, she doesn't actually turn away to get away from the 3, she just goes forward. But at that last place I'd stopped this tape, and then again here, the 3 is a little bit behind and is trying to catch up. And at this place, or the place where I stopped it before, if the number 1 wanted to make a subsequent turn, she could have done it at that time while the 3 is a little bit behind and trying to catch up. Because when you make your sharp turn away from them then, when they're going faster, you almost always beat them, and they're nowhere around when you come around to look at the goal. But she doesn't take advantage of that little bit out of position that the number 3 had gotten, and she goes to the other side of the field and starts over making her maneuvers to try to get past the 3. Here she's checked up, and when she first checks up, there's a little bit of space between her and the 3, but the 3 is closing that space like they should, and the 3 is facing more upfield than she should, and a quick turn to the right from the number 1 would probably beat the number 3 around the turn. So she doesn't even try to turn right. She does try to turn, but tries to turn toward the player, and that's definitely not something that should have been done. If she wasn't going to turn right, she would have been better off just standing still. Let that player come up against her, and she had been in much better position than she is now by doing nothing. Of course, that was probably illegal, but it doesn't get called, and she takes off again. Now when she takes off across the face of the goal, the number 3 is slightly forward of her, and when you see that the number 3 is going to connect or has already connected in a position that you can't control them, I suggest that you don't even try. You don't even continue pushing against them. As soon as you see that they're able to connect in a position that's going to have you beat, I say turn away right then. So I would have turned away just right here. As soon as that 3 jumped up there and got forward of the shoulder, I would have turned around to the right and done something else. So here she goes across the face of the goal. The number 3 is in control, and once again going to the right side. Our number 1 should be pushing the 3 over to the left as far as she can, because she knows she has to turn right, and that would just give her more room to maneuver whenever she decides to turn right. She does get up. Now this last little run, the number 3 was probably in the ideal position all the way coming across the field. Here she, over the right side of the end zone, our number 3 is slightly back, just like she should be, and so she's going to be a little bit hard to beat, but turning away is what our number 1 should do, and that's what she's doing. And as our number 1 started to make that turn, of course she made the turn and just kind of sat there, didn't really jump out of it, but as she saw the number 3 turning toward her, she should have known she could have her beat if she had just, as soon as she sees the number 3 making that turn to be turning toward her, if she had just, the number 1 would just tighten up her turn and go, she would almost always have them beat. So here she goes. Now she has gotten pretty much out of reach of the number 3's racket. And when they turn toward you, they're going to get behind. And that is what caused that 3 to not beat the 1 around the turn. So our number 1 has gotten slightly ahead and pretty much far enough away to the side that she doesn't have to worry about the 3 hitting her racket. And then she stays in front and gets a shot at the goal and gets the shot off before the 3 can get back up there.
Paige is going to see it. She's got some wicked arms, and she's all by herself right now. And she's going to take her time and slow down before she gets to the 30 to make that one count.
So a red team, that is the red number 1 that has just picked up the ball in midfield near the tees. And all the blue players are behind. The red players come up to actually keep the blue players behind. And so the 1 is out there all by herself. Here you can see that she is making, as she makes her bounce across the 30-yard line, she is leaning forward, reaching forward, and throwing forward just like she's supposed to. I would have suggested that she throws down a little bit harder, throws it down harder, and it would come up higher. But other than how hard she threw it down, she's in the kind of perfect position that I suggest for bouncing the ball across the line. But it comes up high enough that she's going to reach down and get it, and she gets the shot off and makes the goal.
Paige gets that one. She's going to go all by herself, but she needs to slow down because she's not going to be able to handle that one.
Okay, of course that's a lineup, and that is the number 1 that went around the front and then picks up the ball and is headed for her end zone. So this time she doesn't have her teammates keeping the blue players completely out, but they are definitely behind. Once again, she comes up and gets her throw-in position pretty much perfect, where she leans forward, reaches forward, and throws forward just like she's supposed to. But once again, she doesn't throw it down very hard like I recommend. And this time it doesn't come back up for her at all, or at least not where she could get it, and it ends up losing possession of the ball as it goes out the back line.
Stephanie passes off to Heather. Heather takes a shot. Livy!
Okay, the blue number 2 is just passed it off to the blue number 1. Blue number 2 is furthest to the right of the screen. Blue number 1 kind of at the top of the screen. She just caught the ball as she went into the 30-yard area, and the 3 is coming up fast on her, but she tries to get the pass off anyhow, and I think it deflected off of something, either the number 3's racket or the horse or something. But this would have been one of those times, instead of taking that iffy shot where you kind of have to throw through somebody or within where they can attack your racket, instead of throwing it at that instant that she would have thrown it, if she would have just sat down and turned hard left, there would have been no stopping that 3. And so when the 1 turned around and faced the goal, the 3 wouldn't have been anywhere around, and she could have shot the goal free and clear.
Horse up. Nice. Takes a shot.
So this time the 2 delivers a pass to the 1 again in the end zone, and this time the number 3 is behind, so it's pretty easy. The number 1 just continues on forward and shoots a goal.
He is racing down the field, flips it into Zach. Zach leaves it on the ground. Zach may be...
Okay, black team is carrying the ball down the field, and the 3 passes it to the 1, and right here the 1 is catching it kind of over his head and out in front. And when he's catching it, he's headed straight for the goal, and the number 3 is behind. So he winds up and shoots. Shouldn't be a problem. So he did everything correctly. His job was easy because the 3 wasn't in front, but his aim was off and the ball hits the post. So he doesn't get the ball again in this series.
Black shirt and the orange shirts all around Braxton. He's looking for some help. Puts it right in Zach's racket, almost through Rachel's racket. Zach turns around and shoots.
We're watching the black team with the ball now. That's the number 1 on the white horse being ridden off by the 3 as he goes in the end zone. And right there, he just reached up and caught the ball. We've already talked about the connection. We're only going to talk about him working. But when he caught it, after he caught it, he's staying within reach of the number 3. So I would have recommended, if he's within reach when he caught it, that he would have turned away immediately. So she does swing at his racket but doesn't get it. And so here he turns away, finally, from her. And right at this instant, when he sees that she is turning toward him, if he would just tighten up his turn to the left and continue to turn, he would have her beat on the turn and get a shot at the goal. But he misses that opportunity. And then when he comes up here, he actually turned too far. He had a little bit of space, and when he turned back, so he was crossways to the goal, she was crossways to the goal, facing his back end rather than his front end. So if he would have just not turned so far, but turned just crossways to the goal, and even let her come up against him, where they'd be parallel, but her horse is facing the other direction, and then jump forward, and he could have beat her around that way. And then, but he turned too much, and then ended up making a turn toward her when there was less than a horse length away, which ends up putting his racket within reach of hers, which I do not recommend. So he got within reach of a racket, but does get past her and gets in a position out in front where he can get a shot at the goal. It's a pretty steep angle, and she's really close behind him, kind of putting pressure on him. But he does have a shot at the goal. He does take the shot, and I think he makes it.
Into Grace's racket. And Grace is going to have to get past Rainy Sachs. Grace takes a turn on the left side, goes across the face of the goal. Makes a right turn, throws it, but it bounces on the post, stays in play, bounces back up into Grace's racket. Grace makes another run across the face of the goal. Makes just a gradual turn to the right, jumps across over the 3, and this time the rackets go.
Okay, we're watching the red team, and the red number 1 has, and it's the red team with the white helmets. And yeah, they have, the number 1 has just caught the ball in the area, and the number 3 is kind of between her and the goal, and almost within reach of her racket also. So she finally does turn away from her, and that was correct. And as she turns away, the number 3 has also turned away and given our number 1 some space between her and the goal, which should give our number 1 some options. And here, actually, when she first made the turn and the number 3 had committed all the way to the right, our number 1 had space and had so missed an opportunity to go to the left, because the number 1 was committed all the way to the right. There was space enough that our number 1 could turn toward her and could have beat her on the turn, and gone around the back, but she missed that opportunity. And right here, the number 3 is actually getting too far forward. So even at this point, since the 3 is too far forward, a checking back and turning toward the 3, if there's room, and I think there is, you could get behind her even now. And as she continues over to the other side, you can see our number 1 starting to make a right turn, and the number 3 is still too far forward and not between her and the goal. And hopefully our number 1 realized that and realized that she should be able to beat her on a tight turn to the right, and it looks like that's what she's trying, or that's what she's going for. So she turns away. The number 3 at this point has gone too far, had started out too far forward, and then took another step or two before she started her turn. But you can see our number 1, as soon as she made her turn, her horse is jumping out of it, just like she's supposed to. And with the 3 not between her and the goal, she could actually throw it like right now. And she does pretty much throw it before the 3 can get back in there. And she had a shot, so she should have been able to make that, but her aim was off, and the ball ends up hitting the post and bouncing back in. But it bounces right back into our number 1's racket, so she has to start all over. She's too close to the D, or she's actually in the D, so she goes toward the corner to get space, well, to get out of the D, but to also get space between her and the number 3. So she actually started her turn earlier than I would have, because she is just barely out of the D, and that doesn't leave her a lot of room to maneuver, like if she wanted to maneuver back and forth to get past the number 3, but she's still okay. And here, this, at least so far, the number 3 is in the good marking up position. However, the number 3 is still, after our number 1 is crossways to the goal, the number 3 is still facing toward her. So right here, our number 1 would have an opportunity to just check her horse, go to the left, and go right behind the 3 and throw there. Of course, she doesn't do that, and as she comes across the face of the goal again, this time the 3 isn't too far forward, but our number 1 is getting some space between her and the 3, which should give her options. And number 1, when she came across the face of the goal, because she just barely came out of the D, she's got a lot of room on her right to turn away. And that's something else she wants, which gives you more options on how to maneuver and more space to maneuver. So she's got space now. The 3 has drifted off out, so too far. So she's not between the number 1 and the goal anymore. The number 1 has made a turn. And you can see once again, as soon as she makes a turn, her horse is jumping out, and so that is good. You should jump. First turn, you should be jumping out of every turn. You should jump out of every turn, and she's doing that well. And right here, the 3 is not between her and the goal, so she could throw it right from here. And the 3 is so far away from her, if she were between her and the goal, she could actually throw it overhead. So our number 1 runs up to the goal and does try to take a shot fairly safely before the 3 can get between her and the ball. And this time it goes in.